Okay, you're gonna get the companion and the summary too, okay?
Yeah. The extra bells and whistles.
Gadget.
We want the
Yeah.
bells and whistles.
Okay, I got both sent to you, Sam. Summary and AI companion.
You want to make Sam the co-host or
Yeah, I'll
host
do
or
that.
whatever?
Don't worry.
You can make Barry's easier. I got enough on my plate, trust me.
All right, Barry, you are it.
All right, I'll make Sam a co-host if I can.
Thank you. Such a privilege.
There we go. Participants.
Okay, Barry, you are now host, and it looks like recording is still going on. So that's good.
Yeah, I won't stop it. Sam,
I'm off to breakfast now. I'll tell you guys about this later, okay?
Okay.
Make co-host. All right, enjoy. Let's see. I will also. Josh, you want to be a co-host too?
No, I'm good. I'm outside on an iPhone. I'm lucky if it doesn't die. I'm on a battery, so.
All right.
One day I'll do these meetings inside, but yeah.
All right, so what's the topic of the day, my friend?
I don't think we set one up, did we?
We're supposed to do our Bohmian dialogue intro.
Oh, how does that go?
Today's GCC recording will be using Bohmian dialogue. Bohmian dialogue allows us to listen carefully to one another. Blah, 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 blah. Bohmian dialogue. Let's try to practice it. And thank you for coming to the GCC. There's only 3 of us at the moment. Sam is now at lunch. I can't do the voice. I'm done. I lost it in between. But anyway, we're supposed to have like a pre-recording or something.
So Sam and Gail are on the road driving to Leavenworth, and that's Leavenworth, Washington, not Leavenworth, Kansas. Who knows what's in Leavenworth, Kansas?
I think we all know that there's a prison there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Famous, notorious federal prison, which I think is still in service. I'm not actually sure it's still open, but it used to be at least. Maybe still is.
Yeah. Well, I'm open to talk about anything. I was just watching a video about car break-ins in San Francisco.
Yep.
And I've been hearing a lot of chit chat about how, I mean, I don't know how society works, but maybe you guys can enlighten me that they're not, certain parts of the United States are not prosecuting small crimes like car break-ins.
Yep.
Oh, I hadn't heard that, but
yeah,
the basic concept is everybody need to make a living, including the crooks. We shouldn't take that, human rights away.
Yeah, that's strange to me. Like I saw it coming, but I thought they'd still, I mean, it's still a crime is a crime.
That's interesting because the word crime is one of those vague words that doesn't actually have a precise definition everywhere.
Yep.
A crime here is not a crime there.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what's blowing my mind is I know when I went to Ecuador and Peru, if you steal a bicycle, you can get 15 to 20 years.
You know why?
I don't.
Okay, so this is where I'm interested. My first class in rural sociology in Ohio State University was really, really useful for me because I come from a rural area. So I sort of understand the crime and punishment and rewards and all that stuff, So imagine this, that when you're in the little village, bicycle is the only thing that you use as a transportation to make your livelihood. When you take away the bicycle, what happened to the family?
You're on foot.
Yeah, so they cannot, they lost their livelihood, which is no different than stealing a car here in the old days where, you know, think of like stealing the truck driver's truck that he make a living with.
Oh, okay.
And in a little village where there's only bicycles, breaking into a car is not a crime because there's no cars.
There's a different story. There's
For
a
example, there is no crime against stealing a UFO, as far as I know.
so crime, so the punishment is equivalent to the level of punishment is equivalent to whatever you cause the pain of the other party that was a victim, if you can think of it that way.
No, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so once you understand the concept, then the rest is easy. Anyway, the one I'm interested is Barry, do me a favor. I want to think of Boamian dialogue, right? Is it humanly possible per ChatGPT? Figure out how to do a prompt to ask that question. So it's like, if it's not even possible, why bother to follow the rules that it's not even possible per ChatGPT that is not, you know, we have so many. What would be the issue? How would I struct it? How would I construct the prompt?
Well,
In modern days, communication, would that be possible to implement Boamian dialogue structure? What kind of problem that we will run into or something along that line?
you want to know whether it's possible for ChatGPT to hold up its end of a Boamian dialogue? Is that what you're asking?
Well, think of this way, ChatGPT, the smartest guy on earth right now, smarter than us, and have the collection data of everybody in the world, right? Based on what we have, making the general assumption here. And I want him, the ChatGPT, to evaluate using current community dialogues structure / norms. Would that be even possible to implement, to enforce, to have a structure of following the Boamian dialogues?
Certainly not to enforce, to promote.
I'm just,
yes, to promote, yes.
I want to say we want to follow it blindly.
See, the thing is that it's a little bit like doing the calculus. You
I
can't
know.
force people to do the calculus, but you can suggest they learn how.
This is why I want you to help me to do the prompt, Barry. Otherwise, I will get into trouble. I'm too.
So I'm not sure what you want. I mean, the question is it possible to have a Boamian dialogue? There are existence proofs of at least one that I know of.
Right.
It's the famous one with David Boam and how do you say his first name? Chandrasekhar? Is that
Krishnamurti.
Krishnamurti?
Yeah.
Yeah. So theoretically, that is an exemplary Boamian dialogue. Maybe people will say no, it isn't, but as far as I know, it's exemplary, and so it's an existence proof. And for all I know, there are other perfectly valid demonstrations of good Boamian dialogues, but they're rare, and they're probably not well attended by the general public either. Somebody had suggested a 3-party dialogue hosted by Daniel Schmachtenberger. It's a 3.5-hour YouTube. And very likely that's a Boamian dialogue with the three, but it's 3.5 hours. I haven't watched it and probably never will. That's the other thing, is that they can be very lengthy.
So let me propose it this way then. What modification is necessary to the Boamian dialogue structure that will make a dialogue more fun and more humanly possible and have a staying power?
Well, one thing that this may not answer your question, but one thing I know that you have to leave out to have a Boamian dialogue,
Of course,
is you have to abandon the so-called argument culture or the debate culture. If you're expecting to engage in a debate or an argument where you're going to adopt a position and defend it, then you're not going to be doing a Boamian dialogue. So you have to walk away from, abandon the notion that you're going to be in a debate model or an argument model. And there's a famous book that came out, I think, in the late 90s. And it was written by Deborah Tannen, Tannen. And the name of the book is The Argument Culture. And then the subtitle is Why the Argument Culture is a Really Bad Social Construct, Why We Should Abandon It. But she pointed out that, at least in America, people routinely fall into the debate or argument model, and she wishes we didn't. Because well, I say nobody learns anything. It disables the opportunity to come to discovering the ground truth, reaching common ground and discovering a new ground truth. And when I came across her book in the late 90s, I thought, bingo, this is really important, because it's so easy to get stuck in the classical argument/debate culture. And it's very hard to break out of it. But that's what David Boam proposed, is get the fuck out of the argument culture. And so is it possible? Yeah. Is it commonplace? No. And David Boam basically, as I understand it, found that no matter how hard he tried, his correspondence kept descending back to the argument culture. And he kind of gave up. With most correspondence, he just couldn't get there. Not with every correspondent. Some he could, but not with every correspondent. And in politics, it's almost a given that you have to be in the argument. You know, you have the political presidential debates. They're called debates. And the idea is that you promote your side and you deprecate, disparage the other guy's side. And that model is just ubiquitous in our culture.
Well, for sake of example,
right, go for it.
What's that? Go ahead, Sam.
Go for it. I was going to say there must be a reason why the argumentative structure is sort of like inherently in human being, maybe evolution, maybe for survival. I think the way I think about it is like we learn best. The easiest way for me to learn is by contrast. What's the difference and make the difference? When I see that, I say, aha, I learned something here because I know the difference and make the difference. Otherwise, when there's no contrast, it's like the whole blue sky with a bluebird flying in the blue sky. I can't find where the bird is. but there's a contrast, a blackbird flying in the blue sky. I can see where the bird is. So I say, aha, there's a bird there. It's like learning is by contrast. It's the only way that I know how to learn.
Yeah. But one of the tricks is asking a really good question that gives somebody pause and says, I need to think about that question. I can't just, dump a response like, from memory or rote or automatic response. It's really hard to, number one, find a good question to ask. And it's also hard in some cases to get somebody to attend to a good question because they'll change the subject and answer the question you didn't ask. They'll respond in a way that doesn't answer the question. And that's a very frustrating experience, to try to ask a good question and the person basically ignores the question and speaks on some other topic or some disconnected topic that doesn't answer the question. And I don't know how to get out of that except say, well, sorry, but we're not having a conversation here.
Well, for me, I know how to do a one-on-one because that's allowed me to focus on one person only at a time. And then for me, someone asked me a question like this about 25 years ago. How do you learn, Sam? And the way I learned, if I can present it visually, it's sort of like I'm in a jigsaw puzzle piece. Most of my piece is being done. I'm looking for a piece that will fit into the one that will continue, allow to get a bigger picture of that. So as I'm listening to you speaking, I'm looking, okay, where is this going to fit? How does that make sense? And how is that piece going to fit in beautifully? And the question I'm asking is that I need help to find a piece that will fit into my continuously chunk of my big puzzle. And once it's complete, I have it for life.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of asking a good question, is you walk to the edge of the partially assembled jigsaw puzzle and you ask a question to which the answer is the next non-existent piece.
That's right.
And it's got to be the next non-existent piece, not one that's out to sea, but one that's right at the shoreline, and finding the question that asks the question, what comes next at this boundary, this interface?
That's right.
If you can ask that question, you can then say, oh, I don't have the next piece. Let's think about that. And that's an art and a science, but it also requires a participant who is amenable to that. And not every participant's amenable to that. They want to go back to the interior. They're going to turn around and walk away from the edge back to their well-established interior, and they won't stop to discuss the next thing where the answer is, I don't yet know. It's really important to number one, have somebody ask a question, and then to which the answer is, gee, I never thought about that. I don't yet know the answer. Let's see if we can find the answer. I had a director at Bell Laboratories who was querying me to see the extent of my knowledge. And when he got to the edge of my knowledge, where I had solid information, it occurred to me that, and it not right away, it occurred to me that he was trying to find the edge, so that where the answer was, I don't yet know that. And it hadn't occurred to me that—
hence the word knowledge, no edge.
Right. So the notion is, can you appreciate, number one, that knowledge is finite and there are frontiers beyond which we don't yet know?
Yeah.
And are you comfortable enough to say, that's a really good question, I don't yet know the answer to that? That's the frontier. So being able to say, here we are at the frontier, acknowledge this is the frontier. And this is where you do research. Research takes place at the frontier.
Yeah.
So in a research culture, the idea is, let us walk to the joint frontier where neither of us knows the answer, and neither of us confirm the other guy's answer, till we get to the common frontier where nobody has the answer. And then we can do research. Then we can participate in joint research. Go ahead, Joshua.
Yeah, it reminds me of the famous meeting of a bunch of physicists. I think it was Niels Bohr, Max Planck, Einstein. I can't remember. There was like 17 others.
The Solvay conference.
The Solvay conference. So in that conference, they had to make a list. I think it was 20 things that everyone there did not know.
Right.
Which is probably the impetus to where David Boam got the idea of Bohmian dialogue, because his mentor was Albert Einstein, who was at that conference.
Yeah, that sort of makes sense. And in fact, in mathematics, it's the Field Prize is a list of, I think, 10 or 20 unsolved problems in mathematics for which nobody has a proof or a disproof, or, you know, and so in any research agenda, there is the defined common frontier. That if you want to win the Nobel Prize or the Field Prize or whatever, you know, the Millennium Prize, answer one of these frontier questions. And there's at least half a dozen that you can probably name, probably more than half a dozen, but at least half a dozen that ought to be able to be identified. In mathematics, there's some classic ones. The continuum hypothesis, the Collatz conjecture, the Riemann zeta function roots. There's a whole bunch of frontier problems that nobody has the answer to, which you can state the problem clearly, and nobody has a definitive resolution. And those make up, among other things, the Millennium Prize list, of which I think one or two have been solved in our lifetime. I think the 4-color map theorem might have been one of them. What's the, I have to look it up. I think there's one or two that either have been solved or progress has been made.
There's another level of problem that I'm dealing with also, like talk about finding that one piece of puzzle that fit to the borderline or whatever we call that.
Oh, yeah.
Line, right.
Yeah,
so
the missing link. Yeah,
so I need to have, you know, not only one dimension, I need to have 3 different dimensions, meaning I need to have 3 separate ways that that piece will actually fit, because I worry about if this one fit, I might be taking away from another piece of somewhere else, that meaning that I want to make damn sure that fit is belong to that piece. That's not something else that almost fit, but it's not quite fit. So I need to make sure that so whatever I learn, I need to have 3 different ways to prove that it is, or explanation that prove that it is actually right. So this is another criteria on top of not only finding the piece that will fit beautifully, but at the same time, you need to come from 3 different perspectives, like isometric wheels, front wheel, back wheel, side wheel.
Yeah, there are 3-dimensional jigsaw puzzles that you can buy.
Yeah.
Where you fit pieces in 3 space. There's also 3-dimensional chess. I don't know if you've ever seen 3-dimensional chess, or 3-dimensional tic-tac-toe is more commonplace because that's easier. And the 3-dimensional extensions of 2-dimensional flat board games is the introduction to this whole concept multi-dimensional puzzles where you have to have it not only on two-dimensional surface, but three and even more. I mean, when you get to 4 dimensions, you're in the realm of abstract mathematics because you can't make a physical model so easily unless you make time so the time dimension, meaning that you can have a movie that's continuous, not a jump cut in a movie. After that, it gets really abstract, and mathematicians will play with multi-dimensional spaces, but they're mind-boggling.
So the same thing, if I can extend that to the next level, is that the human society conversation or political debate is about, when you say something, you need to make sure you have, we call it, some people call it high IQ. Make sure that the voter or the public can hear, accept it, and the person that we're going to vote for me will vote for me, and I'm not going to offend someone, whatever. So there are multiple criteria is part of the criteria that before you say the word, so you got to check 3-dimensional fitting.
But another thing to consider here is that if you're having an oral communication in the space of words, there are things that you can't reduce to words and sentences. So for example, if you're looking at music or dance or other activities, mechanical structures, you'd be hard pressed to map them into sequences of words, sentences, and paragraphs. And a lot of thinking, pattern thinking, musical intelligence, mathematical analysis, audio systems. There are a lot of things like music. There are a lot of things that you simply can't map onto a sequence of words because the expressive power of the spoken language is limited. And you can get beyond the limitations of the spoken word, but then you've got to go into domains beyond the power of spoken language, mathematics, for example, or music or dance, or mechanical aptitude, for example. These are examples of reasoning outside of the space of verbal reasoning.
Right. Well, from my simple perspective would be, you got to spell the word correctly, say the word correct, pronounce the word correctly, grammatically correct, age appropriate, all those.
And avoid puns and plays on words, because as Shakespeare pointed out, you can have a whole lot of fun with wordplay. And if you want to learn about puns and wordplay, go back to Shakespeare's puns, where the ambiguity in the language is there on purpose to give you more than one meaning for a sequence of words. And then, for example, inflection, as you well know, in Asian languages, inflection completely changes the meaning of certain words. And even in English, you can change the meaning of a sequence of words by changing the accents and the inflections. Ebonics is a good example. There's a classic example in Ebonics where you take the 3 words, he be gone. And depending on how you accent it, it has completely different meaning. So you say, he be gone, means he's not here right now. He be gone, meaning he ain't coming back. He be gone. That guy ain't coming back. So I think there's like a half a dozen ways of saying he be gone in Ebonics with completely different meanings.
I didn't know you spoke Ebonics, Barry.
I don't.
Oh, you did that. That was very well done. I feel like I have another language I can speak with you.
Yeah, but you can play with the 3 words "he be gone" and find how many different ways you can express it and accent it and change the meaning.
Yeah.
And as I'm listening to you, see, we talk about spelling, grammatically, pronounce it correctly. Now we got your intention,
right, and
the tonality, and what's your outcome oriented or not outcome oriented. Or are you trying to piss you off or being sarcastic?
Exactly.
Are you trying to tell a joke?
Sarcasm is a good example because the way you say something can be sarcastic or sincere. And sometimes you're on the fuzzy boundary between being sarcastic and being sincere, and you interpret it the wrong way, not the way that the person. So if you're making a joke, I can make a joke and people think I'm being serious. They don't realize it's a joke. There was an interesting episode this week on the NPR, what's it called? The TED Radio Hour, where they take TED Talks on a given theme, 2 or 3 TED Talks. And the one this weekend was on shock value. And there was a guy they had on who gave a TED Talk in which he claimed that the birds in the sky are not living creatures. They were all killed off by the government, replaced by drones. And he had this whole conspiracy theory that all the birds are drones and they're spies made by the government. And he explains the whole concept behind this TED Talk and this funky conspiracy theory and how it came to be that when he's, quote, in character, he's presenting this crazy theory, and then he comes out of character and explains why it's a send-up. And when he's in character, initially, he sounds like he's sincere. And the whole point of this episode of the TED Talk was sort of demonstrate this contrast, you know, the blue bird in the blue skies or the blackbird in the blue sky, between being sincere and pulling your leg. And the question is, can you tell if somebody's pulling your leg? Or do you think they're being sincere and serious and they actually believe what they're saying? And there's a lot of cases where, you know, you're not sure if this guy really believes what he's saying, whether what he's saying is really true, or whether the whole thing is a hoax and made up and a joke.
Yeah, I have the scenario in the family. So when I was telling something sarcastic, my daughter will be able to pick it right up, and my son could not pick it right up. And my daughter will remind my son that Daddy is being sarcastic here.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you're using a metaphor and you shouldn't take it literally. And in literature, especially in poetry, it's thick with metaphors.
Yep.
And whether you take the metaphor figuratively, which you're supposed to, or literally, which you're not supposed to, you get a completely different interpretation. And it's commonplace for people to take metaphors literally, which makes them nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of figuratively, which gives you the flavor of the idea without the idea being expressly laid out. One of the things I like to do is go to Wikipedia, because Wikipedia tries to be literal. So if there's a phrase that's metaphorical, and I look up the metaphorical expression, Wikipedia say, well, this is a metaphor, and then it'll give you the literal meaning of the concept as opposed to the metaphor. And it's real easy to get lost in the woods or lost in the weeds between metaphor and literal, figurative and literal.
Yeah, so way that my daughter say that I'm being sarcastic, she look at my face, she don't listen to me.
Yeah, are you winking? Are you smirking? So the smirk, the wink, the nod, and the wink and the nod may be invisible to somebody who's listening to the words and not looking at the clues that say, I'm just pulling your leg.
So when she listened to me with something she didn't quite understand, she looked at my face first before she continued looking at it.
Yeah. And I suppose if she explains that to her brother, she can teach her brother to look at the other side of the set of clues that betray the sincerity.
Yeah. So that's the trick. I'm revealing that the trick is it's on the face, not where else.
By the way, the word sincere is an interesting word because it's Latin. Sincere means without wax.
Without wax.
Yeah, and the idea is if you take a piece of fruit and you want to make it look really fresh, you coat it with wax.
Right.
And so apples coated with wax look very good.
Wow, love it.
And if you take away the wax, it has a dull surface. And so sincere literally means without wax.
Yeah, no
Photoshop. You polish up you polish up the chrome or the finish on your car and it looks clean, but in fact the paint underneath it is in bad shape. And you're looking at the wax, of course, wears away. The wax is not
beautiful,
not permanent. So without wax, there was a famous story in the Second World War where they were trying to break the Japanese code. The U.S. the allies trying to break the Japanese code. And they got most of the words mapped to their English equivalents, except there was one word in the Japanese code that they could never get. And after the war was over, they got the code book, the original Japanese code book, and they looked up this one word, and the word was sincere. And the idea was that such and such a country is, they thought that the word meant pro-Japanese or anti-Japanese, that such and such a country is pro-Japanese, such and such a country. It turned out the actual word was not pro-Japanese, it was sincere. And that's a classic example of not knowing what a word means. That pro-Japanese, anti-Japanese wasn't the definition, it was sincere or insincere.
Yeah, Josh.
It just reminded me of when Andrew Yang was running for president. He was on the CNN show, and there was the host was Chris Cuomo at the time, and he was so used to talking to all the other politicians and them giving him an insincere answer that when he got to Andrew Yang, he was confused because he's like, "You're actually mean what you say," and he's like, "Yeah, I'm not playing a game. I'm not twisting words. This isn't wordplay. This isn't politics. I'm telling you, this is exactly what I want to do, sincerely." And he was so befuddled or taken with this guy, and so were many others at CNN, that when he lost the presidential bid, they asked him to join CNN because they just liked his personality. So he ended up being an anchor person on CNN.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So, not giving you the runaround.
Just he said what he meant and meant what he said.
Yeah.
And it was
That's what I use. I use the word congruent for that.
Yeah, it's a similar meaning, except that's a metaphor from geometry.
Congruent. Is that geometry?
Yeah, congruent comes from plane geometry, where two figures are congruent if you could pick one up and lay it on top of the other. And
congruent is.
I didn't know that.
My left hand and my right hand are not congruent unless I turn one of them over. See, they're congruent this way, but they're not congruent this way.
Well, I think that brings up a great point, is what is the shape of the conversation? The Bohmian, if you were to map out the sides of the conversation, what were the angles? Are they congruent? Are they, a square is congruent because it's a 90-degree.
If it's the same size.
If it's
same size.
If it's same size. Well, I'm looking at you guys in squares, so I'm thinking squares, but yeah, if it's a rectangle, then it's not necessarily congruent.
Rectangles can be congruent if they're the same size. Same aspect. They're the same aspect ratio and the same size, and they're congruent.
Well, there you go. So what is the aspect ratio and angles of the corners of the conversation?
That one is going to be tricky to map the references back to what it means in terms of a conversation. I don't know how to map that.
It'd be worth trying, though. I mean, like at the end, you go, "Oh wow, we had quite the equilateral triangle conversation." Actually, there was more than 3 points. We had a dodecahedron conversation.
Well, you can say how many sides. So if you have a discussion and there are half a dozen people, each one has their different perspective, and you can say, well, there's 6 sides to this conversation. But there may be 6 sides because there's somebody who's simply not present who would have presented the 7th side.
That's my point, is does a person hold the corners of the conversation?
Person holds the subject. Side. Literally, the word agon is Greek for side. So polygon, many sides, and antagonize, opposite side. So an agonistic dialogue is one where there's multiple sides that they can't both be congruent. I mean, they're opposed to each other. And so agon is a really interesting word. So agonistic and diagonal and polygon and hexagon, how many sides? But typically one person, if they're consistent, will consistently hold one side and not any of the other sides. And I made up the word, just like hexagon is a 6-sided, I made up the word vexagon. And vexagon is a coined word in In a soap opera, you have some number of characters, typically at least 2, but sometimes as many as half a dozen or more. And every character in the soap opera has their own perspective. And so if you try to draw a diagram like a vexagon or hexagon, you have as many sides as there are characters, and I call that a vexagon. And that's a way to reason about how if any one character says an assertion, person on one of the other sides will say, uh-oh, that's diametrically opposed to me. So he's the first person to push back. The other ones will say, well, that's almost the same as me. It's slightly different. And so pushing back, the one who's most diametrically opposed is most likely to push back and react, be triggered by a remark by one person on one side of the vexagon. And you can actually do a little bit of a mathematical model using a vexagon as a metaphor for a multi-sided soap opera conversation, where there's multiple dimensions or directions of conflict.
Let's go back to Boamian dialogue. Usability, adaptability,
usability,
and adaptability. Yeah. So the question is, I know that, okay, we got a few things. I got it out of it. We cannot impose. We have to walk away from it. Perhaps we can make it into a checklist. So the question is, how could we adapt Boamian dialogue style structure that would be useful for any conversation, or something along that line?
Well, you could make a list on one side, column A, things we agree on, and column B, things we disagree on, or we have different perspectives on. So making a list of points of agreement and points of disagreement would be a starting point for a dialogue. So instead of saying, get out of here, I'm dismissing your point where we disagree. Instead of dismissing, you say, well, let's just list them, down as these are points of disagreement. And one of the things about this term steelman argument is where you can reliably articulate the other guy's perspective without disparaging it. Simply say, so Hamas has this perspective and Netanyahu has that perspective, and articulate their perspectives neutrally, objectively, without using disparaging or deprecating vocabulary. Well, that stupid idea, you say, no, that's their idea. And what the hell does Siri think I'm saying? Whatever I said, Siri kept interrupting me. Siri, what am I saying? It isn't Siri, is it? Siri, are you there? Okay.
Somehow the sound is muted. It cannot even come
somewhere in what I said, the syllables Siri must have been in there.
Yeah. Anytime you use that word, it will trigger it.
So I have to go back and listen to the audio and figure out where did I interpose the syllables of Siri in the middle of a sentence.
For me, it's always every time I use the word, you're silly.
You're silly. That stupid, silly idea. That Siri idea. Yeah. So anyway, but to reiterate the point, delineate points of agreement and delineate, without being disparaging, points of disagreement. And then
that's part of the Boamian dialogue, right? It says it right in there. Yeah,
that's the point. So Boamian dialogue, you can fairly articulate the point that you disagree with, so that you can then analyze the nature of the disagreement.
Before you disagree, it would be good to, or I'm trying to find the word for it would be nice to, without using that, it would behoove you, that would be the word I would use, to fully, completely understand a person's point of reality contention before disagreeing. Because if you disagree with something you didn't fully understand, That's where most conversations or dialogues go awry.
Yeah.
Is you're arguing about what you think the other person said, but they never actually said that. That was your perception.
Do you remember from Saturday Night Live the famous point counterpoint send up with Jane Curtin and Dan Aykroyd, where they're doing a send up of the point counterpoint, and Dan Aykroyd reacts to Jane Curtin saying, "Jane, you ignorant slut." Remember that famous?
I do.
I don't know, Sam. You may not have been around when that was broadcast. You can look it up on YouTube, but CBS used to do this. CBS News used to do point counterpoint with conservative and liberal perspectives, and Saturday Night Live did a send up of this point counterpoint with Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin playing the conservative and the liberal characters, and the memorable line is Dan Aykroyd saying, "Jane, you ignorant slut." It's a hilarious piece, and it really illustrates this issue of not taking the other person's perspective objectively.
Yeah.
Simply,
So
just,
as you like what you just reminded me of, unless you understand the culture, with the culture background, there's no way you can understand the joke as or humor in the other culture. There's no way you can do that.
yeah. If you never saw the original point counterpoint on CBS, you wouldn't get the sketch. The sketch was funny, and just stupid.
So this is how I calibrate and validate my, shall I say, integration of the culture in United States, is that I pick up the whole, what do you call that, the Sunday on the newspaper, we have the whole I think 3 or 4 pages, big pages of the cartoons. So I've count how many cartoons I can understand.
Right. Yeah. So the whole point of comedy or satire is you have to know the thing you're satirizing.
Yeah.
To appreciate the point of the satire.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. It's doing satire is a challenging kind of artwork.
Yeah.
And so Jonathan Swift and a few others sort of pioneered the art of satire. On Saturday Night Live, of course, that's their whole shtick, and as there's a lot of comedy, but it's an art. And if you do satire poorly, it's just it falls flat. It just doesn't have the effect. But in some sense, satire is a alternative to Bohmian dialogue, because you're making fun of the absence of Bohmian dialogue by exaggerating to the point of ridiculousness. The antagonism, the agonistic perspective.
Yeah, that's another type of, what do you call that, comedy, which is what I call it the Benny Hill version.
Yeah, exactly. And that's an art. People who are really gifted at that can Monty Python and Benny Hill.
Yeah. Mr. Bean.
Yeah, Mr. Bean. They're really good at doing these send-ups in a way that makes you laugh.
Yeah.
And I wish I was better at it. I've tried my hand at satire, but I'm not that good.
Well, you can use ChatGPT to help you. So I know this, and how could I make it into?
Yeah, but the art of satire and the art of comedy is a subtle art, and people whose profession is comedy will talk about jokes that fall flat. That when they make a sketch like Saturday Night Live sketch, and sometimes it works unexpectedly, and sometimes it fails unexpectedly, and they simply are not that good at predicting whether a joke will land and work or fall flat.
Yeah, from being around a lot of comedians, it's not even about predicting, it's which audience at what time of day. It's
Right.
There is no predicting that.
Yeah. And so comedians learn by experience, to hone the details of their sketch and the timing of their sketch. There's a funny bit in one of Jack Benny's sketches where his correspondent says, "What's the secret to telling a good joke?" And before he finishes the question, Jack Benny says timing. That he interrupts the joke to say timing, pointing out that he didn't use timing to make the joke work. You know, what makes a good joke? And then you have a pause of the appropriate length, and then the answer is timing.
Yeah.
So if he says it too early or too late, it ruins the. It's funny because
Yeah.
it's self-defeating.
Yeah.
It's
That's
funny you
what
say
we
that
call.
because, oh, God.
I was going to say that this is where you call, that's the difference that make the difference between a master
Right.
and an amateur. No
Yeah.
question about it.
So you say something, but you don't enact what you're saying
Yeah.
consistently, and that makes it funny because you're
Yeah.
sort of self-defeating.
One of my winning strategies is always like, I'll use whatever strategy you're using and I make it better and get back at you.
But you know, promoting enlightenment, it's a lifelong, not just a lifelong challenge, it's a species-long challenge.
But the most important fundamental requirement, I call it mindfulness. You must be immersed into it. You must pay attention to listen to what he wants, and you must be pacing. I call it pacing. Basically, you need to literally breathe and in sync. Some people call it in the same frequency as this person.
Yeah. I perennially run into a problem with the correspondent. If a correspondent gets stuck on a problem, they're doing something not quite kosher, so it doesn't work. And I've already done the thing the way that works, and they're trying to repeat it, but they're making some subtle departure from the way that works so that it doesn't work. And then I'm left with what are they doing wrong and how to fix it. And from time to time, I can correctly diagnose what they're doing wrong, but I can't communicate it to them. I try to communicate to them and it doesn't work. It happened not too long ago. There's some great games on the internet that were popular, but they're not new games, or games that were popular 10 or 15 years ago. And what happens is that when a new version of your operating system comes out, a new version of Windows or a new version of Mac OS, you can no longer play the game because the operating system, the game no longer works.
Right.
Okay. And so what happens is eventually somebody figures out a way to modify the game code so that it does work on the new operating system. So this friend of mine had played a game like 5 years ago that we loved to play, and then we stopped playing it, and now we're all on new operating systems and the programs don't work anymore. And I discovered that somebody had modified the game program so it does work on the new operating system. So I said, oh, you know, if you want to go back and pick up where that we left off from 5 years ago, here's the way to do it. And my correspondent couldn't get the version to install on her computer for reasons that were a little bit perplexing, because her explanation of what was going wrong was vague.
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure out, except that one of the symptoms that she described applied not to the game, but to going to the website where you get the game. When you go to the website to get the game, you can log into the discussion forum on the website, or you can download the game code. And the error message that she was reporting was not downloading the game code, it was logging into the discussion forum. And I thought, we solved that problem 5 years ago. She'd forgotten that it's a different problem that we'd solved, and she was stuck believing that she was trying to download the game code. In fact, she was doing something different.
Yeah.
And I couldn't pull her out of that misconception. And she got mad at me. She got mad at me and ghosted me. And all of a sudden, you know, the project just went into suspended animation, and I couldn't figure out how to fix it.
Yeah, I'm in the IT department, IT industry. So right now it happened about maybe twice a week. I have similar situation. But in the beginning of my computer selling business, I probably have about 20 to 30 a day, right? So this is how I do it. This is how I did. I'll tell the enter though. So I say, you just remind them, you know what? a picture speak 1,000 words. Could you take me a pictures of what you're looking at in front of the screen and send it to me? So once I have the picture, that's worth your 1,000 words explaining to me what's happening.
And I asked her to do that multiple times, and she never sent me a picture because I knew that she was on some place doing something other than what she was supposed to be doing. And I said, send me a picture showing me this mistake. She wouldn't send me a picture.
Yeah, because she doesn't know how to take a picture.
No, she knows how to take a picture.
Okay.
In the meantime, I took a picture of it working, showing her that the thing that she says wasn't working. I say, here's a picture of me doing it and it's working. I sent her the picture. She got mad at me for sending the picture. Go ahead, Joshua.
I was just going to say the timing aspect. When I learned how to go from screen capturing to video capturing, it changed my life.
Yeah.
Video,
when I learned how to
show the sequence in time. Yeah, right.
It really changes things because there's that sequence where they think they clicked X, but they really clicked Y.
Yeah.
And that's a game changer in communication.
It's really hard if you think you're clicking on this and you're clicking on that, or you're left clicking or right clicking, which gives you different behavior, and you don't realize the difference that makes the difference. And number one, diagnosing it, guessing the diagnosis, and then confirming the diagnosis. You get lost in the weeds, lost in the woods, whichever, but you get lost, and you can't get unlost.
Well, it's a good thing that we charge people by the hour, so it might take a few more minutes extra to get them to click the right click.
Well, I don't know. It's been 2 or 3 weeks now, and the whole thing just basically, I'd say it went up in smoke, but it just went into suspended animation.
Yeah.
And so I went back and I started replaying this game from 5 years ago, discovering new things have been added to the game that weren't there, and playing it by myself. Go ahead, Joshua.
This just hit me like, if you could download the game and she could not download the game, why couldn't you download the game and send the file to her?
I did that. And here's what happened. First of all, she tried to download the game and claimed that either Gatekeeper or Chrome or something was blocking her from downloading third-party stuff. I tried to send her my copy, the same issue, that either Chrome or Gatekeeper or something like that was saying, this is a third-party application. No, I'm not letting you do it. And I know that there's a way around it. You can right-click and tell it to go ahead and open it anyway, at least on Macintosh. And she got stuck there. She got stuck saying it wouldn't let her download it, either from the original site or from my copy I sent her by email.
So most of the... Oh, go ahead.
At my point, I say, can you play Skype or Zoom so I can look over your shoulder and see your screen? And she won't, she doesn't do that. So I basically can't complete the diagnosis. If somebody gives you an unsolved problem, the first thing you try to do is reproduce the problem. I need to reproduce the problem. Well, when I reproduced the problem, it wasn't a problem, it worked. When I reproduced it locally. But how would I reproduce it on her machine if I can't look at her machine?
I think a lot of things break down with the trust aspect, because when you were talking, Sam, about I'm looking to find the piece of the puzzle, you might be leading the dialogue into the direction that you want to find that piece of the puzzle, whereas the other person is trying to go to the other side of the puzzle piece, and you're pulling them left and they're pulling right, and that's where the conflict happens. But it's because of trust. If I don't believe you're leading me in to the whole puzzle, just the portion that you want to talk about, I might not trust you. So I'm going to fight back you pulling the conversation in that direction.
Yeah. And my correspondent didn't trust me to look over her shoulder. She didn't want me to see what she was doing.
Yeah.
Sure.
And with ladies, it's a big problem with ladies. It's just sometimes so frustrating because they have something we don't have, because they're very vulnerable. They're very vulnerable. So they are worried about people take advantage of her and all that stuff. So think of it this way: when you go, when you communicate with the ladies in person, all you do is want to sit right next to her so you can hear better. she afraid of you or something that you get into her space. I mean, again, it's complicated. So it's like I learned long time ago. It's like you don't reach out and try to shake somebody's hand if she's a lady. You let her stick her hand out if she wants to shake your hand. Like I'm good, you know.
Have you seen the video with the couple where the female has the nail in her forehead? You ever seen that video?
No.
Oh, it's a classic video. It came out maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where the couple is sitting on the couch and she's got a nail sticking out of her forehead, and he wants to point out that she's got a nail, and she doesn't, don't talk, we're not allowed to talk about that. And it's a classic example of you can't go there. You can't talk about the thing that you can't talk about the correct diagnosis. It's allowed.
Yeah.
And that's why I always appreciate like when Stacy showed up, and I really encourage her to like, okay, yeah, I want to hear more your perspective. The more I understand it, the more I know where my puzzle is.
But yeah, these are so-called intractable problems where you can see the problem, you can diagnose it, but you can't solve it because you need cooperation to solve it, and you can't get the requisite cooperation.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to solve the problem of lack of cooperation. Is one that, I mean, this is called, well, Sunday's called collaboration. Well, collaboration is a near synonym of cooperation. Operate collaboratively. If the other person doesn't operate collaboratively, then you can't collaborate.
That's right.
You're going this way, and you're rowing the boat this way, and they're rowing the boat that way. So you go around in circles.
And it's complicated because it's a safety issue, threatening issue, wrong frequency issue, their perspective. As I really always appreciate whenever there's an opportunity to talk about it.
So, I mean, we have a history here in GCC of the failure of collaboration to manifest itself. We've been talking about collaboration for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, but we haven't achieved collaboration. We haven't done a project in which everybody cooperated to make something that no one person can do by themselves.
Yeah.
We had hundreds of hours of talk about that.
I know.
And this was before you got here, Barry. I'm just letting you know that it came down to how do you lead with no leader? So like the Tao Te Ching says, lead from behind.
Yeah.
So we had conversations about leading from the front, the back, the sides, the corners, like every single, and without a leader, there is no one to say, this is how we are going to collaborate. So there's always someone that says, okay, you guys are going left. All right, let's all go right. And then that was the only problem with collaboration, was just deciding that there was going to be, and the leader didn't have to be a person. It could just be an ideology.
This is the problem I have with
dialogue is an ideology.
This is the issue I have with diagnostic reasoning. I work at the Fix-It shop in the community center. People come in with their appliances, which are not working. And the symptom is it's not working. And so you diagnose it, you figure out why it's not working. You even explain to them, if you can, why it's not working. And maybe if you're lucky, you can fix it. But the practice of diagnosing and repairing things is not an imitatable practice. The customer can observe that some technician diagnoses and fixes an appliance, but the customer doesn't have the ability to imitate that behavior on their own, which is why they keep bringing the broken appliances in and saying it's broken, doesn't work.
Yeah.
Not saying, and here's the symptom and here's the diagnosis. They don't have the symptom and diagnosis or the method of repair. They simply say it isn't working.
Yeah.
I don't know how to pass along, I don't know how to model the practice of diagnostic reasoning and repair other than having somebody watch me do it. And even if they watch me do it or watch a different technician do it, that doesn't mean that they can. It's like watching somebody sing a song on stage or perform a juggling act on stage. And I can watch them perform a juggling act or sing a song, and I can't do it. I don't have the talent.
Well, it's not talent, it's practice.
Yeah.
watch watch that guy paint, the flower scene, and I can look at somebody painting a picture and I go, that's lovely. I appreciate that you're painting a picture. But if I put a brush to canvas, it's watercolors. It doesn't look anything like what you're doing. So there's the thing about talent, that it's not imitatable. Edith Piaf could sing, and they try to make a movie about Edith Piaf, and they couldn't find an actress who could sing like Edith Piaf. So they had to use a artificial intelligence to synthesize her voice.
The word talent is kind of complicated. Some people born with it. Some people have the have the parents or whatever, the mirror neurons from it. Some people have a lot, 10,000 hours to get to the talent. I mean, depending on which part of the talent you're getting from. Some people born with it, the 3-year-old can play piano better than the 20-year-old or something like that.
Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly could dance when they were kids.
Yeah.
And my whole career, and the average person can't dance anything like, Fred Astaire or Gene Kelly.
Yeah. So the talent itself, so the talent itself could be the 10,000 hours talent versus the born with talent,
I don't care how much I would practice. I could never expect to sing like, I don't know, Frank Sinatra, for example, or Elvis Presley, because they had some function of their physiology that allowed them to sing, which, not present here.
I actually study about singing. So actually, from my perspective, it's like Michael Jackson, for example. He was beginning singing when he was very young, and he was a lot of singing practice and all that stuff. So what I found was, even somebody at old age can actually get a voice teacher and a singing teacher, and then they can practice like 20 hours a day or something like that. They should be able to get to wherever they need to get to. So singing part, I'm not worried too much. I just don't have the time and energy. It's not my focus right now, but it can be accomplished.
Several famous singers, Linda Ronstadt was one, Julie Andrews was another, who lost the ability to sing as they aged. That is their physiology that enabled them to sing. They lost it, and they basically had to go through their senior years without the ability to sing, even though they were at the top of their game when they were in their 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Yeah.
But you can see an interview with Linda Ronstadt where she admits that she can't sing anymore. Or Julie Andrews, who went through a passage where she couldn't sing anymore. Okay.
Yeah, some people cannot sing because of voice. Some people cannot sing because they're out of breath. Some people cannot sing because of whatever the reason is. But sometimes psychologically, sometimes physiology and whatever.
In my case, I can't distinguish between two notes that are very close together. So if I am making what sounds like a note, and there's a whole range that all sounds the same up here. So how can I modulate, singing if I can't distinguish between two adjacent notes?
So this is what my music teacher teach me. Put your hand in front of your mouth and put your hand this way so that you channel the sound into your ear, and practice about 10,000 times.
That's what announcers do. Radio announcers used to do that. They hear their own voice. But if once the sound gets to your ear, then if it doesn't get distinguished inside your ear, you're lost.
Well, if you have practice a lot, make it louder, make it play with it. So you get to it if you want to practice. I think it can be done.
But it was pretty clear from a very young age that I didn't have what's called perfect pitch. I mean, if you have perfect pitch, you can tell if a note's off by half a note. And if you don't have perfect pitch, you can't tell the difference between an A and a B on the scale. They sound the same. There was a guy, a friend of mine, who was a scientist at Bell Laboratories. He had no ability to appreciate music. He said, "You play music, it sounds like noise to me." And he knew that music was music. He knew that it was such a thing, but he couldn't experience the musicality of music. His audio processing simply turned it into noise.
But he must be something else that he's very good at. He's very talented about.
He was a brilliant scientist. He was one of the very best scientists at Bell Laboratories, but he had no faculty for appreciating music.
What did he specialize in? What particular science field that he's specialized in?
I think it was applied physics. I'd have to go back and look it up, but
Hmm.
because he had some inventions, but I'd have to go back and look them up.
Hmm.
But he was a very good scientific thinker and experimentalist and whatever. But
Yeah.
you know, when it came to music, he was basically out to lunch, and he'd say it. You know,
I always believe that when you give up something, you have something else that's much better than the other people.
I mean, he knew how to take scientific measurements and reckon measurements and work out scientific models and stuff like that. He could handle complex scientific theories, mathematical theories, and scientific theories. That was his strength. But he had to give up something else. Look at me. I'm nearsighted. I'm not very dexterous. So any game where you have to be very dexterous, like tennis or golf or baseball, forget it. I just don't have I don't have the fine motor control. I couldn't be a neurosurgeon. I couldn't even do electronics on a circuit board because I didn't have enough fine motor control. Things got smaller and smaller and smaller. At some point, I didn't have the dexterity to hold a soldering iron with that much precision. And basically, I never did work on circuit boards, except very big ones.
Good old days.
Good old days. I mean, once things got down to,
Surface mile.
small enough, forget it. I can't see the distinction, and I can't, don't have the fine motor control. And I know people who have that. There are people in the fix-it shop who can do soldering on really tiny little things and have that fine motor control and that fine vision, and I don't. Yeah, all right. Okay, I'll do something else.
So going back to Bohmian dialogue, in what situation would be found very useful and necessary?
If you want to do research, fundamentally, if you want to get beyond the frontiers and figure out the next thing that we don't yet know, Bohmian dialogue is one very good way to navigate to the frontiers and then organize a systematic program of research to fill in the gaps.
Great, that's wonderful. You nailed the head in with the nail. So is the collaboration we have here fit into that requirement?
I don't know that we're trying to do any research. Do we have a research agenda here? Not to my knowledge.
In the beginning, it was.
Yeah, but whatever the research agenda was, it didn't pan out for whatever reason. And I think that the notion that this is a research community, it isn't a research community. I'm sorry, it isn't. And I don't really see.
Wait, what? I'm going to push back on that. You said that so quickly and so absolutely sure. What made you so sure that it's not?
How long have I been here? 5 years?
No.
Remind me when I
3.
joined here. I've been here for, I don't know, I'm going to say 5 years. In 5 years, I haven't seen any significant advance in a research frontier that is a joint research frontier. The closest we came to that was making a list of nomenclature words that had different people had different definitions of. Remember, we made that list of words? And the first thing we notice is that the same word appeared more than once with different definitions. So the objective of having words have a unique meaning that we all agree on didn't achieve it. We achieved a list of words that had multiple meanings to different people, but then now what do you do? Because if you use that word, it doesn't mean the same to me as it does to you.
So if that's the case, along the same line, I'm asking the question, Bowman, dialogues, usability and all that stuff. So if it's not the real research, so what the hell are we doing here?
Well, that's what we're basically filling up a Saturday and a Sunday morning. I mean, we're just basically.
So Bowman dialogue does not apply to us.
I don't know that we're doing Bohmian dialogue here. We may be mentioning it, maybe even discussing the definition of it, but I don't think we're practicing it. Because we're not doing it, we're not achieving any research objectives that we all say, let's work on this research project. What research project? You name it.
I don't know about you, but for me, every dialogue I have with, even with my kids or my wife or my employees or my customer or my vendors and all that, so I check myself against the list of Boolean dialogues list. I usually do.
I mean, once in a while, a person will say, now I see something I didn't see before. Once in a while. But it's not the objective. It just happened to actually, you have a random moment of aha. But that's not the main objective, that we want to have as many of those as possible in as short a time as possible.
I mean, aha, a lot of times it's because the situation, the timing, just like say, the joke is all about timing. That works in that particular situation. Yeah. It doesn't work in any other situations.
So it's like, go out for a cup of coffee with somebody. There's no particular objective, except to spend time and have a cup of coffee and get to know them, but you don't necessarily solving a joint problem together.
Yes.
Josh?
Well, I think in order to do that is each person has to clearly state their objective and then their intention to get there, and then find the common thing. Is there a practice that we can do that gets Barry's objective, Sam's objective, Joshua's objective, Sam Hahn's objective? Is there a way to practice something that does all of those, or does someone have to put their objective to the side and help the others come to their objective?
Yeah.
And that's where we got stuck. Was the only reason we got stuck is we never decided who, and this is my opinion, of course, this is not objective truth. We never said who can join and who cannot join. And we were there for 2 or 3 years of talking about how we kick someone out of the group or how we invite someone into the group. So until that got solved, you can't go around a room that is constantly changing, asking everyone to collaborate on the same objective. It's just impossible.
I mean, it's worse than that. I mean, in my life, I've come across frontier problems that I don't know how to solve. Problems that I want to solve, want to find a solution, that I've done basic research and not found the solution out there in the literature, and gone to a subject matter expert. And in my experience, this goes all the way back to Bell Laboratories. If I go to the subject matter expert and I say, here's the problem I'm stuck on, the subject matter expert will say, I don't know how to solve that either. I went to one subject matter expert and I said, I have a list of life problems I can't solve. He said, Barry, he says, nobody knows how to solve those problems. They're unsolved problems, not just for you, they're unsolved problems for humankind. And then I realized, okay, I now have a list of unsolved problems that's not just my problems, they're problems that our human society have never solved since the dawn of civilization. And I can make a list of them.
Yeah, what was one of them? I'm just curious.
How to create a regulatory mechanism for human society that's functional and nonviolent.
A mechanism or a law or a protocol? What are we talking about here?
The first solution that was invented was the rule of law.
Okay.
Didn't work. Rule of
law
law
would be a regulatory mechanism that does not work.
Right. So then I thought, well, what's the next level up? And I said, well, leaving aside protein units, leaving aside living beings, how do pieces of technology interact? And the most prominent example was high technology, communication systems, internet systems. And I looked at how do engineers make technology systems where every part of the engine works compatibly with every other part, that every part of the telephone network works compatibly with every other part, that every part of the internet works and the answer is they didn't use rule-based. They used function-based and protocol-based. And I go, okay, I get that. I know what a function is. I even know sometimes how to make a function or how to compute a function. I know what a protocol is. I know sometimes how to craft a protocol. And I can see that with non-living systems, you can sometimes build a high-functioning system, which all the parts work compatibly, constructively with each other without getting in each other's way. And that's a existence proof of a regulatory mechanism that works. The problem is protein units don't seem to have the capability of evolving to that high level. We're stuck in this 6,000-year-old rule of law that's chaotic and violent.
Do you think everyone's stuck, or do you think there's a few people that can do that?
Well, an example would be Thich Nhat Hanh. And I can give you a list of people who proposed.
Well, how about Barry Court? Can Barry Court do it?
Provided that I don't have to interact with the other protein units who don't have it. So I can find a small number of people, Tim Higley, for example, where he and I can work compatibly with each other without fighting. But very small set of cohorts who are systems thinkers, who don't behave the way 95% of the human population behaves, which is antagonistic. And if I go on the social networks and I present a thesis, invariably somebody will pop up and push back on it. Invariably. And the person who pushes back on it doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, but they push back on it. And they're uneducable.
And why is that protocol of them pushing back stopping you from coming to the solution?
Because I need them to cooperate and collaborate, and they elect to oppose.
So what if you took out the cooperate and collaborate part and let them use their pushback to not solve the problem, and then you solve the problem? And if you get stuck, you come back to that person and say, you know what, you got stuck, I got stuck, so let's both see where we both got stuck. But if they didn't get stuck, then you let go of your ego and do what they did, or vice versa.
Instead, what happens is we do collaborate to create a drama. By me being the protagonist and them being the antagonist, we collectively create a Shreklish drama. So I find that I am co-creating a lifetime of Shreklish drama, dreadful drama, which I can then turn into art if I have the ability to turn it into art, but mostly it's a Shreklish drama. So we're creating a world full of Shreklish drama.
But are you creating the drama, or are you co-collaborating it? Because if you let go of the drama and just said, you know what, I don't know how to do this.
So if I get up and walk away, so the drama, basically the curtain comes down on the stage and the drama ends, and I walk away to my cloister, and I go into my cloister, and I sit down at my desk by myself and I write something on paper. Then there's no drama. I write something on paper. I can even publish it on the internet. And very likely nobody will even know it's there or look at it or read it or push back. Once in a while, somebody will read something I post on the internet and push back. Most of the time I post it and nobody even looks at it.
But isn't that what we're doing here? I mean, in the sense that if you have something that you're working on and you don't know if anyone wants to listen to it, if you come to a regular meeting on a Saturday morning and you have the ability, because I remember Sam, when he first started this, was doing a deep dive on each person, meaning let's spend 2 hours getting to know Sam Chan. So we're going to do an interview of Sam Chan, or actually he did 1 hour was a presentation where Sam Chan says exactly what he's been doing with his whole life for 1 hour. And then the next hour was us asking questions about how he got to that like why he did those things. And he called it a deep dive. And sometimes they went for 2, 3, 4 sessions into the same person.
Yep.
That was his way of trying to know, like, and trust each other before we collaborate, which was good, except I think it was more divisive than it was uniting.
I've looked for people who wanted to collaborate on one of the frontiers that I worked on. And I have found people who say this is a really good frontier, but they have no idea how to extend it beyond the limits where it already is. So somebody can say, well, that's a really interesting frontier. I like that. And that's the end of the story. There's no further development. And I've been looking for somebody who says, I've run the ball to the 95th yard line whatever, or the 5-yard line and now I don't know how to get over the goal. I got to the 5th yard line. Somebody says, "Oh, you got to the 5th yard line. That's great. Can I get to the 4th?" I don't know how to get to the 4th, let alone the goal line. So basically it sits there. Now, maybe eventually somebody will come along and figure out how to get it to the next yard line. But I don't know how. And at this point, nobody that I've met knows how to advance it either.
Based
Even
on
if
what
they
I
want to.
know, yeah, based on what I know so far, based on what you say, is that most people, I would say 80% of people I know of need to deal with whatever the survivability of their today's, tomorrows, and they pay their bills and all that stuff. So it's a luxury item to be able to say, okay, I just want to hang out because I don't have to worry about my survivability, whatever that is. So it's a privilege.
Look, you sent me a HP Sprout.
Right.
You say, can you get it to the goal line? The answer is I tried for a couple of weeks and I
Yeah.
couldn't advance it because I couldn't find software that's available today that even makes it behave as it did 15 years ago.
Right.
And the answer was, I don't know how to advance it to the next level of performance.
Yeah,
In
the
fact,
reason my fallback plan was that you can use it for like, for example, Zoom call. It's a good
I
camera.
can use it as a Windows 10 machine.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So it's a very nice Windows 10 machine, but it doesn't do anything beyond what a plain vanilla Windows 10 machine will do.
When I was watching that whole drama take place with the HP Sprout and talking to both of you guys, I noticed one thing is that they discontinued that model because it didn't work, and other companies had advanced all of the features on those models. And it was exempt. Like I admired the fact that you wanted to get something that didn't work to work, but if it worked, it would be the machine that everyone used in their houses.
Right.
in the
Yeah. What happened is that Windows evolved Windows, whatever it was, 8. They evolved Windows 8 to Windows 10. And when they upgraded from Windows 8 to Windows 10, the software, which had been written for the first version of Windows 8.0, no longer worked on 8.1 and certainly no longer worked on 10.
Yeah.
And there was no way to go back to Windows 8.0 and pull together the version that would have worked for the first year of its existence.
So here's my question is, and I'm not trying to be combative, I'm just asking the question is, if you've spent your whole life trying to do something and you get it to the 99th yard line and you can't get it over that one last thing, no matter who comes along and says they can do it, you're going to tell them they can't because you can't.
No, I'm going to tell them I haven't. And
I know, but
I'll
they're
even
gonna
tell them why
they're going to tell you that they have, and they're at the finish line, they're done, and you're going to say, no, you're not. You forgot X, Y, and Z, the things that I couldn't do. And they say, oh, well, we didn't do those things because that stops us. We did the thing that didn't stop us, and we reached the finish line.
Yeah, they redefine the goal line. They redefine the goal line. So they say the 99th yard line is the goal line. Well, I can say, well, the 95th yard line was the goal line for me. I got that.
But I'm just saying, so in my career, I was a rapper, and I challenged Eminem, the supposedly at the time the greatest rapper who had lived at the time, to a freestyle rap battle. But I said the rule was you have to say something that has never been said before. You can't write it down. It has to be a freestyle rap, which is defined as non-written. But the ambiguity was, just because they didn't write it down doesn't mean they didn't memorize it. So it has to be something off the cuff, right there in the moment. Spontaneous. Now, how do you define, and that was the hard part, is how do you define if it's spontaneous or not? And one of the things we did is people would give you words to say, so you could pre-memorize all of the potential possible words, which someone to this day has done. But very few people have taken every word that's ever been said and put it into a rap.
So it's an unmeasurable definition. If you say this is spontaneous, unrehearsed, you can say that. But is it? I mean, if I dreamt of something And it was a silent dream and while I'm asleep, and then I get up and I enact the dream. Was that unrehearsed? Was it spontaneous? If I dreamt it, there was a version of it that circulated in my brain in advance. So it can't be spontaneous, unrehearsed. And I have gotten up and done things that I rehearsed in my dream sleep. When I was learning to ski or solving some kinds of puzzles, I would solve them in my dream sleep. And then I would get up the next morning and enact them. So I can literally rehearse things in my dream sleep. I've proven that.
But I'm saying, if you look at a piece of work like the Tao Te Ching, the reason that was written is because the king at the time, this is the story I was told, said to Lao Tzu, "You cannot leave the kingdom without giving us all of your knowledge." So he wrote a very clear message, which is mathematically kind of perfect. I think it's 81 passages, in a way that only 1% of the people could read. So he was speaking to a very specific audience, the 1% audience, and he wrote something to make them question their own morality of their own quest for the knowledge itself. So he wrote it in a way that they question why they needed the knowledge from him in the first place.
Yeah. I thought this.
So the point that I'm making is, you want to do effective computing, but when will you be complete with that solution? What does that look like? And can that be clearly defined in a way that you could let go and let someone else take the baton and get to the finish line?
Stephen Wolfram is working on that. Stephen Wolfram has this notion of the Bruyad. You know about the Bruyad, which is the Bruyad is the space of all things that are potentially computable.
Right.
And the idea is that in the space of things that are potentially computable, what haven't we yet computed that if and when it is computed, we'll have some new territory to enjoy. And I think the same is true in human society. Human society potentially can envision a high functioning, peaceable world. People have written utopia is literally the name of high functioning, peaceable world. And utopia literally means nowhere. You know, the Erewhon is the word nowhere backwards. So utopia is this envisionable world that is nowhere that we've ever been. And may pragmatically not exist. Even though
in all my philosophical and consciousness studies, I've come to the realization that it's up to you, the individual, to decide if your view of reality is good enough for you. It's only between you, and it's an internal struggle, not an external. And I think that goes to the same with anything, is if you are satisfied with the solution and someone else isn't, it will just keep looping.
Well, I think I mentioned this before. The name of the state of Israel, Israel, means struggles with God, literally. The word Israel literally means wrestles or struggles with God. Look at what's going on in the Middle East.
So I'm saying so my point is that there's a person who does not believe in God, so they've already solved that problem by not believing in a God, period. So they're not struggling with God because they don't believe in God. So they've solved the problem.
And if you go back to what God refers to in Judaism, refers to the phenomenon, process, or spirit of becoming. So if we're wrestling with becoming, which is to say research, and we say research is the objective of discovering something we don't already know, forget it. It's not going to happen. There's no such thing as finding new knowledge. So we're not even going to try. We're going to pretend there's no such thing as the aims of research. There's no hope. There's a hope. Hope is the sponsor of research. Well, there's no research, there's no hope. Whatever exists, that's it. We're done. And a lot of people say, I'm just going to have a dull middle class existence, and I'm going to live until I die. And I'm not going to try to I'm not going to try to become anything more than what I already am, which is a schlemiel.
But is a schlemiel enlightened more than the person who's pursuing the quest of knowledge for the rest of their life?
I don't think so. I mean, you can look.
Is it
You can find
possible that
lots of people.
they're the ones that have figured it out, and the person that's constantly searching is not figured it out?
Well, the fact that we do continue to have breakthroughs, there may be rare, and like we had the transistor. Well, we had electricity, we had the transistor. We had powered flight, we had space flight. We had telecommunications, we had radio, we have the internet, we have computers. So in our lifetime, we've seen lots of new things that got introduced into society that didn't previously exist. So there's evidence that that research does have a payoff. Somebody says that, well, we're all done. There's no more research. We're done. Nothing. Whatever we got as of 2023, that's the end. That's the end of the world. No further breakthroughs. No AW. No artificial. Life. Forget it. It's not going to happen. It's hard. It's hard to believe that there's not going to be any further breakthroughs in learning or technology. It's hard to believe that.
But I'm saying that path of thinking is one direction of one type of society. It's not all of society. There are other societies that are not on that path.
There's the Taliban, which is going backwards in time. They want to go backwards to no education for women, no education for...
Right, in your opinion, but I'm saying, believe it or not, there are groups of people that still live in the Amazon rainforest that have no computers, no electricity, none of these things that you grew up with. They have no desire to create a new boundary of a science, but they live a life of I'm not even going to define it, but let's just say 100% different than our life, the collective of the three of us.
Well, they don't have the same objectives that we do. Now their objectives may be to find tomorrow's meal.
Yeah.
And also to find a full belly, but also see, in our minds, they're ignorant. Would you agree?
No, I wouldn't say they're ignorant. No, I would say, for example, their goal may be tomorrow's meal and tomorrow's baby, because they're still making babies. And why would you make a baby? If you think there's no future, why would you make a baby?
Yep.
And also not to be a predator. I mean, not to be a food for a predator.
Yep.
Yeah. So
and also not warmth and heating and making sure that they have some sort of protection against disease, etc.
I mean, there are adaptations. As the environment changes, the species adapts. If they maladapt or don't adapt, then they probably go extinct.
Yep.
And so if you don't want to go extinct, if you say, well, it's if we don't do anything, we're going to go extinct because the environment is pulling the rug out from under us. And you say, well, we have to adapt to a changing world if we're going to survive. And the desire to survive, not as an individual, but as a species, so that if you have a baby, the baby is going to have a life. Then you've got to figure out, how do we evolve and adapt so that we don't go extinct? And that's all about, I believe that we can become a species or a civilization that survives. We can sustain life. If you don't believe that you can sustain life, you say, well, we might as well just kill ourselves now.
I agree with everything you said, Barry, except one thing. They didn't make baby because they think there's future. They make baby because it was fun for them to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you can do things. You can do things happenstantially without thinking about them, like having sex. Turns out having sex makes babies. Most people today know that having sex has the consequence of making babies.
Well, people in the little Amazon jungle may not know that.
Well, yeah.
Or the urge become.
I suspect they do know that.
Yeah, if the urge of having sex is much stronger than that, all the blood going to the wrong place without not.
If you're 12 years old, you may not know that having sex makes babies.
That's right.
But if you're 60 years old, you probably know that having sex makes babies.
Oops, like.
I'm just saying that the different objectives really change the society's goals because they might not even know that there's 8 billion people on the planet right now.
They may not even know that 8 billion is a number that has any meaning. They may
They-
know that 1, 2, 3 infinity, you know, that's it. There's 3 and then there's more than 3.
Right.
But
Like, have
remember,
you seen? Oh, go ahead.
yeah,
Go
remember
ahead, Tom.
that every human being has so many factors. One is the factor of the time. If you don't die now, you might die tomorrow. You know, the timing thing, survivability, competition, take away your food and all that stuff. So the way I think about it is almost like you try to swim up the river that's rushing you down. It's like the against the time, against you're hungry, you need to eat every day, you need to be safe, and because your competition may not be there. All the variable changes every day. And mainly, I would say 95% of the variables are affecting your survivability tomorrow, whether you like it or not.
One of the books of the Old Testament is called Numbers. Why is there a book of the Old Testament whose name is Numbers? Why is that such an important concept that there's out of 5 books, number 5, the 4th book is called Numbers.
What's the book about? What's the book about numbers?
It's basically a census of counting. It's about counting the number of people, this and that and the other thing. It's really a census. I mean, that's the main reason it's called Numbers. It's got census information in it. It's not just about numbers, but
So it's a calibration and validation of so that so let's take into look at the big picture.
yeah. So the big picture is how big is big, and
Yeah.
numbers is about what does the word big mean? What's the metric of bigness? And it introduces the concept of a metric counting
Yeah.
the size of a population, for example.
Projection, planning.
And it basically, if something is growing in size, that is, the numbers getting bigger, is there a limit to how big it can get before it overwhelms the resources to sustain that number? We got 8 billion people. How many people can this planet sustain before we have famine? You can't have the concept of famine without the concept of too many people living on too few resources. And that's numbers.
So that's the real conflict that we're trying to deal with, right? Is
Famine
counting.
means extinction.
No, I get it. I'm just saying, if you're in the rainforest and you're a group, let's just say 30 people.
Yeah.
So sometimes you swell up to 40, sometimes you go down to 25, but on average, the tribe has stayed at, between 25 and 40 people.
Right.
And you have plenty of resources for that for generations and generations. As far as you can remember, your, ancestor, the stories have been told that there's always been enough. Every so often there's been people that have shown up, but then we kill them because we don't need that problem, and that takes that away.
Yeah, they're aliens.
Whatever they are, they're a threat. Yeah. So they get killed, just like the food that they eat gets killed, and that threat goes away because no one ever finds them because they've traveled so far just to even get to that tribe. So their existence is no knowledge of finite or infinite. They don't even have watches. They're not keeping time the way we're keeping time.
They can talk about moons. How many moons have you been alive?
Yep. So I just remember the movie that stated this idea was The Gods Must Be Crazy.
Yeah, with the Coke bottle.
And it was at least enough to get you to start thinking that there are other realities where a Coke bottle becomes the biggest source of problems in a village.
Yeah.
Well, it's the alien technology. Coke bottle is literally a technology.
Let me see if I can land my plane and go somewhere with this thinking. Is we're sitting here on this little speck in our solar system or in our galaxy, and we're trying to solve for planetary problems here on Earth.
Yeah.
But if we find out that this is just one of millions of other planets with millions of other different life forces and millions of other different situations, some similar, some completely dissimilar, what will that do to our perspective? Like, in other words, the problem of humanity is it a problem, or should it be something that's rejoiced that we've never had 8 billion people on this planet. Shouldn't we just celebrate the fact that there's more than 1 million people alive on this planet? More than 10 million, more than 50 million, more than 100 million, more like the fact that we've reached this point. When are we going to stop and say, hey, let's party? Like, it's a great, like, we did it. We got 8 billion people here.
Well, and then there's suffering, because the more people you have, the more people who are suffering.
Well, they're suffering because they've never defined how many people are supposed to be here.
Exactly. So that what happens is the suffering comes first, awareness of suffering then comes, and then the reason for suffering comes, and then the reason for suffering is because we have too many people and not enough resources. But look at the stages of
is that a real thing, that we have too many people and not enough resources, or do we have too many people that don't know why they're here?
Well, there's a lot of people who don't know why they're here. But
like, because you say there's not enough resources, but how the hell did we grow from 6 billion to 8 billion in the last 20 years?
Oh, because we had a breakthrough in agriculture.
So we do have resources.
The thing is that there was something called the Green Revolution. I don't remember the details of it. We figured out how to increase the yield of an acre of land. Because if you take the yield of an acre of land a century ago, that would not have supported 8 billion people. We figured out how to increase the yield of croplands so that we can increase the number that it can support. And we're up to 8 billion now, but there's going to be a limit beyond which we don't have enough.
But why is that a problem?
Because people are going to start dying of starvation. It's going to be famine. You know, one of the
that happens all the time.
Is famine. Remember,
right, but it's a pendulum where, let's just say we get to 9 billion and then we have 5 billion die off.
Yeah.
So we still have 4 billion left. And what if that 4 billion figures out that the key number is 6.66 billion people?
Yeah. So what's going to happen is, first of all, you have to have all of the lamentations, the mourning. You have to have the survivors have to mourn the loss of their siblings, their parents, their children. So you have a whole period of mourning, which is suffering, unhappiness. And then all those people who mourn the loss of the people who died, they eventually die. And now you have a new generation who doesn't know that level of famine. And then that group is going to basically be naive. And the problem is they will forget that you better not grow past 6.6 billion, or you're going to have another round die-offs.
Well, I use that number purposefully to say they won't necessarily forget. They'll be told that if they use that number, that's the devil.
Yeah. And there will be some people who believe the religion. There will be people who dismiss the religion. And those who dismiss the religion will go on blithely and expand to the point where the system collapses. The notion that overbuilt systems collapse is a discoverable thing, but sometimes you have to discover it by direct experience, and sometimes you discover it by reading the history books.
So what is the number? Has anyone ever found the number of how many people we can sustain on this planet without suffering?
There are people who've estimated it. I don't know if there's an agreed upon estimate.
But I mean, it depends on so many things, right? So it's about, like, for example, this pandemic happened and the war happened and all.
And climate change, because when climate change occurs, which it is, then the arability of land and the rainfall versus the droughts, all that stuff becomes unpredictable. So at some point, we're going to say, gee, there's a drought in, where's the drought? Middle East? I don't know. Someplace there's a drought. Oh, I know. It's, I heard it the other day. Oh, the olive trees. There's a drought in Spain. As a result of the drought in Spain, the olive trees, which are very thirsty, aren't producing olives. So Spain is having a failure 2 years in a row of the olive crop, which is a big deal in Spain. Okay. Why is there a drought in Spain? Well, they say it's because of climate change. It changed the amount of rainfall that Spain's been getting. And it's a systematic decline. So now that means that they can't live off of their olive trees because they ain't going to have any olive trees. And they either adapt or they die off.
But I'm saying, is it possible that we're creating a problem that doesn't exist?
Well, is a drought a problem that doesn't exist? It is if you're an agricultural community. It is if you're a community that needs water to drink.
It is if you're not nomadic.
Well, I mean, yeah, sure, you can, I suppose you can get up and move from Africa to Europe.
Well, you could move from Spain to Mongolia.
Maybe. Can Mongolia support the population of Spain? I don't know. But yes,
if you prepped it for 40 years, I'm sure you could.
I mean, humans have migrated all over the planet, and there are some countries where the influx of migrants is overwhelming the country. So we get migrants coming in from South America or Central America, migrants coming in from, I don't know, northern Africa, and the countries that are getting this, Netherlands are getting influx of migrants, and they don't have the resources to support them. Massachusetts is getting an influx of migrants, and we don't have a way to house them. We had a plan in Massachusetts.
Yeah, but I lived in Massachusetts. There's a lot of land outside of Boston.
But do they have houses on them?
You can easily build houses if you would like to house those people. That's not a problem.
The state had a plan to house immigrants, and that plan had a finite number of residences to put in the immigrants. Suddenly, we're getting a flood of immigrants in Massachusetts that's exceeding the capacity to house them in real time. It's not like we can't build houses. You can't build a house overnight. So now you have immigrants that are literally sleeping in the luggage claim area of Logan Airport because they got no place to go when they land. There's no more temporary housing for immigrants. They've run out.
I don't know. I think my view changed ever since Xi Jinping came to San Francisco, and supposedly they couldn't clean up that city, but they sure as hell did it pretty quick when Xi Jinping came.
Who's Xi Jinping?
Or what's his name?
Xi Jinping, yeah, the president.
How do you say his name?
Xi Jinping. You're talking about the president of China, or
the dictator, whatever you call him.
I'm just saying is, there's a lot of things that people say are problems and they just keep calling them problems, but then all of a sudden someone just says, oh, it's gone, not a problem anymore.
No, it's only for one day or the days that he's here.
But that's my point, is if they can do it for one day, they can do it for every day. They just don't want to.
It's different, my friend. It's different. For a few days, you can sustain that. It costs so much money to clean up the place. It is just.
You know, when Nixon went to Russia, everywhere that Nixon went, they cleaned up that location for one day.
Yep.
And he visited a bunch of different apartments around Moscow, but every apartment, even though it was a different location, had the same furniture in it. They kept moving the furniture, the furnishings.
I know where you're coming. I know where you're going. So I'm
saying, if you can fake it till you make it, you can actually fake it till it's actually not a problem.
Well, but if he had 17 copies of Nixon going to Russia, 17 apartments couldn't all have the same furnishings in them at the same time.
They moved the furniture because they cannot afford to have 17 sets instead of they can only afford to have one set, remember?
Here, I'll say it more clearly. In the Buddhist tradition, suffering is a state of being, not a state of doing.
Well, it's from
you don't do suffering, you experience suffering.
I studied this for the last 50 years. Let me explain to you what suffering means. Like when you're breathing, is that suffering? Try stop breathing.
Exactly.
Is breathing, well, breathing to me is joyful. And
no, it's suffering because it's like you have to pay attention to the other. If you go to the wrong place, like inside the water, you won't be able to breathe, you know. So you got to pay attention to where you're breathing, like breathing in smoke, breathing in competent.
So there's my point, is one person's suffering is another person's joy.
Let me give you the joke about, this is my favorite joke on Zen Buddhism, about the young monk telling the old monk that life is suffering, and the old monk tell the young monk, say, yes, you're right. Someone just brought me some yummy food. I have to I have to heat it up and I have to eat it one bite at a time, and then I have to digest it, and I have to poop it out. It's such a suffering, this with this yummy food that they just gave me. And then of course they give me some new, dress. I mean, what do you call that? The costume, the thing for the monk, right? The whatever the special clothing they have. You know what? I'm suffering because they're giving me new one. I need to take it off one leg at a time. I have to put it back one leg at a time. I need to adjust it. All those are suffering to me. That's what the old monk tell the young monk. So it's a matter of perspective if you look at it this way. So yes, it's basically, but most people, the way I think about it is that when people tell me they're suffering, I say, yeah, you're right. Congratulations, because you're alive.
Yeah. Life is a struggle. I mean, look at, in English, struggle. In Arabic, jihad, same word, struggle. In German, Kampf is in Mein Kampf, my struggle. The word struggle in Israel, Isra is struggle. The word struggle is in every language, and it's a big word. Jihad, Mein Kampf, wrestles with God. We creatures struggle. Life is a struggle.
Yep, and because you're alive, you can stop struggling 6 feet under. You won't be struggling.
Yeah, rest in peace. And rest is not struggling. Rest in peace, you're dead. Okay, but you're resting in peace.
Would you rather be struggling, or would you be rest in peace? We can come and make me a choice.
I'm just saying, would you rather have 2 billion people struggling or 8 billion people struggling?
I would take 8 billion anytime. You know why?
Yeah. Why?
Guess. I'm going to let you guess. Why do I prefer 8 billion people struggle versus 2 billion people struggle?
Because you don't want to be one of the 6 billion that don't exist. If there's only 2 billion, there's a good chance that I'm one of the not 2 billion.
That's right.
More likely to be one of the 6 billion who basically went extinct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my point is, we should be glad for the problems that we have, because of the fact that we've not only had these problems forever, but now we have more people to share these problems with.
When I go to the fix-it shop, I'm glad for the incoming things to fix that I can fix, but I'm not glad for the problems that I don't know how to fix.
Right.
And one of the things that I noticed, and I mentioned this several times, is that if you think of a distribution of things that come into the fix-it shop, well, we're getting the tails. Trivial, just put in a fresh battery, or impossible to fix. And the ones that are nominal, we're not getting any nominal problems that are fixable with some effort. We're getting either ones that are trivial to fix or impossible to fix.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for the one that I don't know how to fix, because it tells me this is normal. If I have everything in the world that I can fix every time, like, come on, that's too easy. That's no challenge at all.
It's amazing. I go in and I pick up an item that's on the incoming shelf, and it's either trivial, just got to put in a fresh battery, or it's impossible. It's broken beyond repair.
At the same time, Josh, I want you to come up with a concept. It's like, I don't know where you come up with a concept. We created this problem. To me, everything has consequences, like karma does, right? So it's because of this, therefore that. We didn't create a problem. The problem just showed up unannounced.
Well,
if I may say that.
To get a little existential or philosophical, I don't think we even know why we're here, and we all haven't agreed upon that same thing. And that's why there's these religions and ideologies and societies, because everyone gets to come up with different reasons for being here.
There's about 100 people in the room. I was giving a speech about, being a successful entrepreneur and all that good stuff. And this is in Silicon Valley, of course, not too far from the Apple headquarters. So one of the questions showed up was, Mr. Sam Chan, what's the meaning of life? I make them wait. I'm not sure I told you the story or not. I make them wait. I say, this is a very complicated question. I don't think we have time for that. And I look at the organizer, I said, we have time. It's okay. We have to stay until 2 o'clock in the morning. I say, okay, fine. Then do that then. Okay, just be ready. I look at those people that work very hard, startup, as you know, about 90% of the people in that room is startup mode and working 20 hours a day and all that stuff. I say, well, it's actually very simple, very complicated. So the meaning of life is that there's only meaning when you're alive.
Meaning of life is to figure out how to make a life worth meaning.
Yeah, that's another perspective. But for them, they're wasting their life away because they're working 20 hours a day. They're all they're looking for is try to do the finish line and bake the bakers. It's all about money. It's all about creating wealth, being both successful in their career. And their life is not important. Getting accomplished, getting their startup, be successful is more important than their life. So I reminded them that the meaning of life is that there's only meaning when you're alive.
I like the way you phrase that, and I think that goes over a lot of people's heads.
Yep, that's like people. I tell you, there was complete silence for at least 2 minutes.
Yeah,
the entire room was complete silent for 2 minutes.
And that's Viktor Frankl's famous book, The Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah. How to make a life worth that. How to make a life that has meaning. That's the so-called purpose-driven life. Find a purpose in life and fulfill it. And that makes you have a life of meaning. If you don't have a purpose, you're aimless in life, then your life has no meaning. It's aimless. Makes no difference if you live or die. Doesn't make the world a better place. Doesn't make it a worse place. It just makes it a crowded place, more crowded place.
So the way I'm thinking about a situation, you want to call that a problem, I say it's a situation that I need to deal with. So if you label them a problem, then you have, look at it from different perspectives. Like I don't want to use that problem because it's a situation we deal with it. We have enough food, we have enough this, are we projecting enough thing? Are we helping each other? So that's what the more people we have, the more opportunity we have to be living in our humanity.
Yeah, I miss Doug Breitbart's saying, which is it's all of us or none of us, which is a very bold thing to say because there's so many of us.
Yeah.
But I truly believe he's accurate with it's either all of us or we just continue to search for our individual meanings and either honor each other's differences. But if we do want to collectively solve the problem, it's got to be everybody wants to collectively solve the problem.
I give you a metaphor. It's a very simple one, okay? And a plane go down in the middle of the desert or jungle, wherever it is. Would you want to rather go down with one person or would you rather have 50 people with you?
In the jungle?
In the jungle.
I would rather 50.
Why?
Because it's more resources, even if I have to eat their bodies.
That's right. That's why
I'm just saying I'd rather have 50 because if it's just one, the minute that other person dies off, it's just me. And that's up to me to do everything. Whereas if there's 50 and 10 of us can collectively survive, I've seen these shows. Actually, they've done this in all these reality shows where they put people on an island individually and then they have to find each other, and the couples or the triads that form, they succeed.
That's right. So the name of the game, your hidden agenda should be that make sure your neighbors survive and everybody around you survive. It's not a problem at all. They are here.
Well, do you guys know the famous story, the parable of the soup and like heaven versus hell, where they're trying to feed themselves and it's
Man
falling
with no
on
elbow.
Them? That to me should be taught in schools as the first principle in kindergarten is we're here to feed each other as opposed to feed ourselves, because from every book or story or movie, the person who's just out for themselves never wins.
Or their win doesn't last very long.
Or their win is like the genie with the 3 wishes. They get their wishes, but they're not happy. So what you just said, Sam, I think is very poignant, is without the desire or the meaning to help others, you were living a life devoid of that meaning. Even if that is your happiness of being a loner and by yourself, because I've done the loner thing and been by myself, and there's a real joy to that when you can self-sustain you and you can find your own happiness. It's wonderful for a while until you get to the point where you say, oh my God, that's so awesome. I want to share that. Oh, there's no one to share it with.
Well, another one metaphor I always use. I mean, I got so many of them. The other one would be, I'll give you a coupon or whatever you want to call that, credit card to have a 5-star meal in the 5-star restaurant. But the requirement is you have to eat alone. Versus I give you a 2-star restaurant, you get to eat it with your friends. Which one would you take?
Brilliant.
Yeah. So again, it's all about. It's like me talking to 4 different people, or do I want to talk to myself? So it's like, yeah, it's like, come on, that's a simple concept. So we're here for a reason. Again, it's all about that. If you label it's a prompt that I have to talk to 3 different people that are smarter than me. It's like, oh.
Well, the reason I just share this before we go is I came to the GCC because I was posting a Facebook Live or Instagram Live of doing a fire up in the mountains by myself. And a Russian lady came on and said, wow, you live by yourself. You know, I had land in California. I lived by myself. We started talking about how we defeated our own fears, because you have to, you know, in order to live by yourself, you have to get rid of your own fear.
Yep.
Because the fear is the one thing that will stop you.
Yep.
But then I asked the question, how many other people are like us that don't have these fears? And she said, well, there's this group called GCC, and she invited me to this group of interesting people. She didn't say that they have no fears, but they're very interesting people. So I got on here and I started meeting the most interesting. I met Aaron Perlmutter, who is the guy who started our Facebook group. I met Sam Hahn. I met Stacy, so on and so forth. But William Charlton, I don't know if you guys know. There was another guy, a Russian guy that lives, I think, in New Zealand. But just the most brilliant people working individually on brilliant projects, such as Sam's Collaborology. I don't know your lifelong work, Sam Chan, if you could define it as Inglebardian or whatever you define it as, but I know Barry's effect. I'm saying individually, each person that has ever come in and out of this group is pretty fascinating of their lifelong mission.
Yeah, that's what hanging out is all about. I get to know you. I get to know you better, deeper, and for me, that's the meaning of life.
Yeah, well, I'm missing Glenn, and I'm even missing the antagonism of our friend from Canada, whose name I will not mention.
Alan?
Yeah, I didn't want to mention the name, but but I'm saying you had a 12-hour discussion with him. I think I had 6-hour discussions with him that go nowhere. But
Talk about suffering. Boy, that's the definition of suffering.
It can be suffering, but there was also enlightening times that I've had with Colin, and I'm missing the individuals that are working on things that I would never work on because I'm crazy, but not in that direction, if that makes sense.
In a conversation, if I may, I learned it from a master about conversations that either you're serving others or others are serving you, but you cannot mutually serving each other.
How come?
Try to shoot 2 targets at the same time.
Try to what?
Say it again.
Try to shoot 2 targets at the same time.
Shoot 2 targets. Bing,
Yeah.
bing, bing.
Oh, sure. You just line them up.
Well, can you get them right? You know, the question.
You have to be a 2-handed gunslinger.
Right. The trouble is we only have 1 bullet right here.
Oh, well.
Because the problem with this is this. Think of this way. Remember about puzzle. While you try to solve your puzzle, I have my own puzzle. Which is more effective is that you can help me with my puzzle, or I can help you with your puzzle. That's the metaphor I can use that explain to you why either I'm serving you or you're serving me, that we have a wonderful conversation.
I got you. But I always think about the conversation you're going to have 5 years from now, where you're going to say something that you thought about that Barry said, and that creates a better line of thinking. So you're a better person, Sam, 5 years from now, and you pass that on to someone. Like, to me, we're all interconnected because of experience and interaction.
That's right. I mean, for me, every week I mean, every time we finish a 2-hour thing, I always learn something. I always learn something like Booman dialogue and all that stuff I was not ever heard of. I mean, all that stuff, like, believe me, I got thousands of friends all over the world, and they have deep conversation with them. I mean, half of my Facebook friends on the half of it, like probably a couple thousand. I would say all I have about 4,000, connection, whatever you call Facebook. Out of them, 2,000 of them, like I have deep conversation, have very deep conversation with them. Otherwise, I won't friend them. So that's how I mingle around, I would say.
Yeah, well, I appreciate Barry. I will never forget you telling me about sincere in Japan and how that was related to, they thought it was a people's culture, not a word that they misinterpreted. And I think, and then the Latin you said about wax, sincere, I would never have put that together. So thank you for that.
Yeah, the steelman
Sincerely.
argument. Yeah, sincerely. Steelman argument. So again, all the new things I have.
Wax
Anyway,
on,
coming
wax
to
off.
appreciate that,
Yeah.
Barry. Yeah. Thanks, Josh. So
Thank you.
until tomorrow, or maybe next week, whatever works for you. Take care of yourself. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So I'm going to kick Sam off just to make sure that this works. So remove Sam.